Headphone highlights. Hello, I'm Master Marslander, and this is the Fiio FT3. This is their dynamic driver headphone, their full-size dynamic driver headphone. We recently reviewed Fiio's full-size planar magnetic driver headphone, the FT5. We're going to be doing quite a bit of comparison to the FT5, so if you haven't seen that video already, I do encourage you to go and watch that now so that you have full context for this review. Do know that the FT3 here was provided to me by Oppos, so thank you very much, Oppos. But of course, as always, all thoughts and opinions are going to be my own. Take a look at the build here for the FT3. Like I said, they are a dynamic driver headphone. They're a 60mm dynamic driver headphone, quite a large driver in here. They have an impedance of 350 ohms and a sensitivity of 105 dB. Now, they say that these are an open back headphone, but when I put these on, my voice is muffled, my fans are muffled. There's actually quite a bit of sound isolation, not as much sound isolation as a fully closed headphone, but they're isolated enough that I would actually categorize these as semi-open because they're definitely not full open. Whatever the case, taking a look at the body here, we have right up front this very kind of hubcap looking faceplate on the driver. You're either going to like that design or you're not. I think it looks pretty cool, especially on the white version of these. I don't know if that's new, but I did see that they have a white version now, and frankly, the white version looks sick as hell. But the black here is also quite nice. In any case, this is an all aluminum body. Very solid, very, very well machined, very well made. You got aluminum on the faceplate, aluminum on the yoke system, aluminum on the swivel system here. You have a spring steel headband, which is wrapped in this, well, frankly, it's just kind of a rubber that is texturized like leather. It's not really leather, but it is stitched and it looks okay. It's fine. We have a comfort strap, which on the top end has that same kind of rubbery faux leather texture, but on the bottom end has some actually pretty soft feeling suede. It's not really padded. It's got a teeny tiny little bit of foam padding, I think, but otherwise not a whole lot of padding. And it does use an elastic system to adjust to your head size. There is no adjusting the size on the actual headband. You do get a little bit of swivel. It's not a whole lot, but it's enough, I think, to fit most heads. And we also do get some tilt. Now, unfortunately, just like with the FT5, the FT3 here has a spring-loaded system. As you can see, it just snaps them back into place. And the spring system on the FT3 is, I would say, quite a bit stronger than it is on the FT5. And the problem with the spring system is that when you are wearing the headphones and they form to your head, say they form like so, the problem is because of that spring system, the cups are always going to be trying to spring back to their natural position, which means that you always have this kind of constant pressure on the bottom side of the headphone going into your head. So when you're wearing them, for me, it's pretty subtle. And I think for most people, it's probably really not going to be that big of a problem. But there is a real bit of pressure right here at the bottom of the ear cup that is pushing more into my head than the top. Because the top, again, has that spring that is pushing it back away from my head while pushing the bottom back towards my head. Surprisingly, despite having this very well machined and very well made and very robust full aluminum body, these only weigh about 390 grams. And that's with the cable. So having a full aluminum body made like this for under 400 grams, that's pretty impressive. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that does for us when we get to comfort. As for your indicators, on the right side, you have a small little R printed right there. On the left side, you also have a little L printed right there. And then for redundancy, on the very bottom of the headphone here, where the connectors are, 3.5mm connectors, by the way, you also have R and L for right and left. So a good number of indicators on the headphone for your right and left channels. In terms of accessories, you actually get a pretty robust package, starting with the cable. So, okay, as you can see, I haven't untangled the cable here. I haven't rolled out the cable because the cable is too freaking long. It's about a 9-foot long cable. So I didn't even bother using it, but it is a well-made cable. if you take a look here, it's actually very, very similar to what we saw with the FT5. You get your right and left 3.5mm terminations here, which are labeled very clearly. And then you also, once again, have this really cool modular design at the single end here. And again, how you do the modular system, you have this knurled section, knurled ring right here. You start to twist that clockwise, and as I do, you'll see that it goes down to reveal the tip end of this termination. I pull, and now we could see that, yeah, look at that. Modular uses like a 4-pin mini XLR system, and you can swap out the tip of this. You get a variety of different tips. Pop all these guys out here. So yes, you get a variety of tips, as you can see, and an XLR adapter. So how this would work is with the single 3.5mm, of course, you could just pop on your 1/4 inch. Boom, now you have a 1/4 inch. But you also have a 4.4 pentagon. And how we would attach this guy is, again, we would turn this clockwise to reveal the modular tip here. Pull that off. It's a little tough, but you can get it. Don't worry too much about it. Then the other one will just pop right back in there. It only goes in one way. Once it's in, you can screw it right back on. And now, pop that guy off. Boom. 4.4 pentagon balanced. Great. And then you have the XLR adapter as well, which the 4.4 goes right into. Boom. Now you're full XLR balanced. Hooray. It is different. It is a different cable. It uses a different kind of woven design. And I do think that the termination here on the single end is a little bit different than it is on the FT5. But it is, again, a very well-made cable, just too damn long. And also, because I'm being nitpicky, once again, the color on the cable, it's less noticeable, much, much less noticeable than it was with the FT5. But the color on the metal bits are just slightly more blue than the color of the aluminum on the actual headphone. Just slightly. It's, again, nowhere near as noticeable as it was with the FT5, but that's just being really, really nitpicky. Whatever. Besides the cable, we also get 2 sets of pads for the FT3. And much like the FT5, they're very simple to take on and off. I'll go ahead and pop these off now. There you go. They just use a clipping system here, pretty basic. What I have on here right now are what they call their protein leather pads, but I would categorize these actually as a hybrid pad. You get protein leather on the face, you get perforated protein leather on the side here, but the inside of the pad is actually, well, the camera's not going to pick it up very well, but the inside is kind of like a soft suede. It's not leather on the inside here, it is more of a suede feeling, so I consider these more of a hybrid pad, but they are very well made. They're very soft. They're not really angled at all, but that's fine. They're soft. It's not really memory foam, but very good protein leather pads. The other set of pads you get are these guys here, which are full solid suede. Suede on all sides of the pad, inside and out. No perforation. So these are just a solid suede pad. As you can see on the camera, they're very, very dark, but again, you could just clip these guys on. No big deal. Very, very soft. Again, very well made. But they are, again, I would say a little too small. At least for my ears, they're a little too small. And we'll talk a bit more about this when we get to comfort. But other than that, well-made pads. They are soft. I can't really complain too much about them. So great. We get the pads. We get the modular cable. And then just like with the FT5, you get the same very, very well-made, very nice-looking leather carry case. This thing looks fantastic. Yes, it is very reminiscent of a Focal carry case, but with the kind of cross section here on the handle, which pulls up to be a handle and folds flat for, I don't know, portability or whatever. But it is real leather. It feels really, really nice. It's made very, 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 very well. It is a hard shell case with a little bit of give on it. It's not very big. It's got a little bit of a butt, but not that big of one. And yeah, it's a very, very nice looking carry case, built very, very well. On the inside here, we have some compartments for our cable. We have some compartments for the various adapters and such. And then the headphone itself, Again, just like with the FT5, it uses this elastic headband system, so it just drops right in there. No big deal, you don't have to adjust anything. Very good case, very good. Once again, Fiio is giving us a very nice accessory package here. Now let's talk comfort. Once again, a full metal body here, full aluminum alloy body. Very, very well made, very well machined. Feels super robust, but is surprisingly light. It's under 400 grams, and for a headphone built like this, that's kind of a rarity. So it's surprisingly light for what is a very robust feeling headphone. So that immediately is going to help a little bit with comfort. You do again get this elastic comfort strap, so there is no adjusting the headphone size. You just put it on and it will more or less just automatically adjust to your head size. I will say though, the comfort strap, it does a decent job when it comes to the weight distribution. I don't really feel like there's so much of the weight of the headphone. That's not really what I'm feeling here, but what I am feeling is a tightness with the comfort strap. I don't know if it's just the elastic needs to get maybe worn out a bit more, but right now, using the set that I have here, the elastic is just a little bit tight, a little bit too resisting. So what it almost feels like is that the comfort strap is itself pushing down on the top of my head, as opposed to the weight of the headphone pushing down on the top of my head. So it's okay, but it is giving me just a little bit of pressure, kind of not dead center top of my head, but kind of like just the topper dome of my head feels like it's getting pushed down a little bit by the comfort strap. So I do think that the elastic is just a little bit too firm, I guess. I don't know. It's just a little bit tight. Just feels a little tight. And then the pads themselves, like I said, the pads are made very, very well, and they are soft, but they are, for my ears, a bit too small. My ear is really kind of crushed in here. It's not really touching the inside of the pad, like the face of the driver here, but it's crushed on the inside, and the side wall of the pad is kind of cupped in there a little bit. And that's not ideal. I would say they're actually a little bit smaller. The pads feel a little bit smaller and a little bit more kind of cramped than the pads on the FT5. The clamp force is manageable. It's not too much clamp force. It's not too fatiguing. However, I'm not sure if this is an issue with the pads or an issue with the way that the headphone overall is utilizing that clamp force. But man, these are not comfortable with glasses. Without glasses, this feels significantly better. Yes, my ears are still, crushed and cramped a bit too much in the pads, but once I put the glasses on, this is a little bit of a problem. These are very fatiguing when I'm wearing glasses. The glasses are really being pushed like right on my temples here. It's not a good feeling. I don't like it, and it gets fatiguing pretty quick. I can't really wear these with the glasses for all that long before I just kind of want to take them off and scream a little bit. Not a whole lot of comfort if you're a glasses wearer. It is a little bit better with the suede pads. They're just a little bit softer than the leather pads, but otherwise, I don't know, man. It's just not a good fit when you're wearing glasses. It's kind of rough. So with that in mind, where does the FT3 fit in our comfort cloud system, our comfort cloud scale? They're overall built very, very well, and they are managing the fit and the comfort well. It's just that the glasses is the issue. So I'm going to be a little bit generous here and give them 6 clouds of comfort. It's still good, a good amount of comfort. It just would be a lot better if it wasn't hurting me with my glasses on. Now let's go ahead and talk sound performance for the FT3. Do note that throughout the majority of my testing, I used the protein leather pads here. I do not really like the sound profile of the suede pads. It is a very different sound between the two pads, so it's nice that they give you the option. I do very much prefer the sound on the leather pads. You get much better bass performance and bass presence on the leather pads than you do on the suede pads. The suede pads are honestly a little bit too light in the bass for me, so didn't really care much for them. Overall, the FT3 is a subtle V-shaped headphone that leans a little bit more on the warmer side. It has a middle of the road kind of soundstage, not very narrow, not super huge and wide, but middle of the road. And again, I think that the protein leather pads help give you that little bit extra kind of soundstage. The imaging is actually quite nice. It's pretty precise and pretty easy to identify. However, it did feel a little condensed, not necessarily like it was really focused right in front of me in this very narrow field, more like it felt like it was just more in my head than outside my head. And I know that might sound a little strange when it has kind of that, again, middle range soundstage. You'd think it would have that more kind of immersive space, but for whatever reason, the imaging just feels more like in my face, behind my eyes, than it actually is out in front of me and around me. Just a little condensed feeling, but otherwise it is pretty decent, and I am able to kind of pinpoint and separate where things are coming from. The bass is pretty natural. It might even be a little bit light, not nearly as light as it is with the suede pads, but it's just a kind of a subtle bass, not a huge presence of a bass. It's kind of relaxed. It's kind of controlled and leveled out. It never gets overwhelming, and it's not really blooming and bleeding into your mid-range. The quality of the bass is okay. It's not super detailed or resolving, but again, it's also not really super muddy and getting into places it shouldn't be. In terms of sub bass performance, there's not a whole lot of it. If there is any sub bass present here, I'm really having a hard time noticing it. Even on tracks that I know have a pretty substantial amount of sub bass, I just don't think it really hits there naturally on its own. The mid bass is a little funky. It feels a little crushed, and I want to say muddy, not so much like it's, smearing all over your mid range. It's just, I don't know. It feels a little too dense. It's like a dense kind of mid bass that really doesn't have a whole lot of definition, and things feel like they're starting to get a little bit lost. And this is where we run into a similar problem we had with the FT5, in that the low mids just feel a little off. It feels like there's something missing there, something that's not really coming through, like it's being maybe a little bit veiled by something, or it's not quite hitting the frequencies it should be. But there's something going on with the low mids that just feels off. It is a lot more present, a lot bigger, a lot more noticeable of a problem in the T5s than it is with the T3s. But there is definitely a similarity here where that kind of mid bass or low mids just feels a little bit off. It feels a little bit hollow sounding. I would say that the FT3s are more of a mid-forward headphone. It is a much more mid-range present kind of sound signature. And what it offers in the mid-range is actually pretty nice. You get an okay amount of detail, an okay amount of definition, and vocals sound pretty solid, albeit maybe with a little bit of artificial warmth in them. Depending on what you're listening to, sometimes deeper male vocals can start to get into that low mids and start to, again, sound a little bit hollow. And at the same time, female vocals at the top end, if they're really high pitched, can start to sound a little bit too shouty at times. So kind of the major extremes of your mid-range get a little wonky, but bring it more inward to an actual middle of your mid-range, things in there sound pretty nice. And then in terms of treble, the treble is, I would say, pretty definitively rolled off at some point. There's not a whole lot of like top end. And this results in the treble sometimes sounding, I would say, maybe a little bit flat. There's not a whole lot of texture and sparkle or dynamics in the treble range. It's there, but it just feels a little almost like it's being blanketed down. But this is a pretty high impedance headphone at 350 ohms, and it's a dynamic, which means we can tube them. And yeah, tubing the FT3s, ooh, they kind of shine. When you put the FT3s on a tube amplifier, like my TA26S, you get bigger soundstage right out of the gate. That mid-range gets boom. A good chunk of space more air, more volume, more immersion. And with that extra immersion, you are coupling it with improved imaging. The imaging is no longer as condensed as it was before. It relaxes. It gets a little bit more loose. It's a bit further away from me. It's not right behind my eyeballs. It's like out here now, where it kind of should have been from the get-go. And it's nice. It's got some air. It's got some space. It's definitely better separated. It's a lot more immersive and still being very, very precise. As you would expect from a tube amplifier, you do get an added bit of warmth in your sound signature, but you also get a pretty big boost in bass performance. The bass presence just really comes out, really shines on a tube amplifier. It's more impactful. It's more energetic. It's more bombastic. It still is not bleeding really into your mid-range at all. It's just finally like there and hitting you in the face, and it's fun. It's a good, fun amount of bass when you have these on a tube amp. However, I still was not able to tell that much of an improvement, if any, in terms of sub bass performance. The tube amp, while does improve the FT3s in a lot of ways, still doesn't really fix that problem in the low mids. It's maybe a little bit more present, I guess, in the low mids, but there's still something a little off there. There's still something that just feels like it's missing. So unfortunately, it doesn't fix that. Vocals have more air. They have more presence. They're still very forward, but they just feel natural and nice. A little warm, but I would say the vocal performance gets more engaging. The treble range is still getting rolled off at the top end, but you're actually getting more treble presence on a tube amplifier. Maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense, but yeah, man, it's just, you get a little bit more shimmer, a little bit more, almost like a little bit more definition in the treble range. I don't think you really are, but it certainly gives you the sense that there's more happening there, even if it is still getting rolled off pretty early. So back to back, what exactly is the difference between the FT3, the dynamic, and the FT5, the planar? The FT3 is a smoother, more relaxed listening experience compared to the FT5, which is a lot more impactful and a lot faster. There is also just objectively a lot more bass presence in the FT5 than there is on the FT3, even when the FT3 is connected to a tube amplifier. And again, both of these headphones share that similar kind of strange behavior in the low mids, but it is more emphasized on the FT5. Despite their flaws, what's really cool about these headphones is that they're kind of the perfect example of the sound difference you get going from a dynamic driver headphone versus a planar magnetic driver headphone. Generally, a dynamic driver headphone would normally have more bass, so that's a little bit different. But other than that, they're like perfect examples of the difference. This is a much more relaxed, smoother, a little bit warmer, a little bit chilled out, but very fun and enjoyable sound signature, while the planar here really shines when it comes to its speed and impact, kind of the transient hits you get into this thing. The attacks on the planar, very planar-esque. So there's a definite difference here in terms of the technology and how that technology is producing sound. And they're both, I think, combined, listening to them next to each other, really, really good examples of what that different technology does. So that's neat. But as for which one you should choose, it's not really a matter of which one of these is better, because they are just very, very different. If you want to have a more smooth, relaxed, chilled out experience, go with the FT3. If you want to have something more impactful, speedier, and probably a little bit more dynamic, go with the FT5. The FT3, I do think, is a great start for Fiio in the dynamic headphone space, just like I think that the FT5 is a great start in the planar magnetic space for Fiio. They're doing some really good stuff here, primarily with the build quality and the accessory package. Good stuff. But the competition is fierce in these price ranges. $300 dynamic, $500 planar. You got some really stiff competition and you have to come in swinging. So they both have rooms for improvement, especially when it comes to their tuning. But if I can correct the tuning while maintaining the kind of build quality, I think they're really going to have something pretty cool. Anyway, Oppos, thank you very much for providing the FT3 for us for this review. We really appreciate you. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I'll be seeing you again very soon.